Hey boys and girls, Bored now back with you, and this is going to be another television review, and as you can see it's my final review of His Dark Materials Season 1 Episode 8. It is the finale and it is called Betrayal. So when I say the Season 1 finale, that is of course because it has been recommissioned, the BBC HBO co-production, and it will return next year. So they're basically planning on doing all three books, but I think they renewed it for a second season as soon as this season had started airing, so they were obviously pretty confident of getting a second season. They knew it was going to be pretty popular because of how well known and well loved the book is. So here we go with the finale, and I'll go straight into it, full spoilers. First thing to say I think about this episode, which I really liked, is the way it sort of switches things around, and you get sort of a turnaround with the Lord Asriel character played by James McAvoy, and the Ruth Wilson character, Miss Coulter. They really switch around by the end of the episode, the sort of sympathies with them and kind of their motivations. There's a big reveal anyway, which I'll get to. I think you always sensed that there was a bit more to the Ruth Wilson character than she may have been. There was sort of a good motive behind what she was doing, but you maybe weren't quite sure what it is, or I wasn't anyway. I think the biggest surprise is maybe what happens with Lord Asriel and how he really goes into a murky territory, because I think up to now we'd been sort of kind of conditioned to root for him and that he was on the side of good, but this episode certainly brings that into question, it's fair to say. So obviously last week's ended with Lyra and Roger and Pan finding Lord Asriel at his laboratory. It's obviously the first time Lyra has seen him really since she's at this sort of age. I mean, she was an orphan, she was a young baby when he gave her up all those years ago, so really she has no sort of memories of him. And obviously she's confronting him for the first time about the fact that he's her father and he didn't tell her, and then the whole secret with Miss Coulter being her mother. And the surprising ending last week was how he reacted to seeing Roger, because he freaked out when he saw Lyra, and he was he was worried that she was there and didn't want her to be there, thought she was getting in potentially into trouble. Yet when he saw Roger, his eyes literally lit up, and he was much more enthusiastic and says, "It is a pleasure to see you here." And the way they play this is actually really, really clever, really smart. Because you really don't see it coming from Lord Asriel what he actually does in this episode. So Lyra confronts him about the past and what have you, and she actually has the line of the episode, which is where she says, it's something like, "Your choice in wives or your choice in partners is as bad as your choice in bears," which is to do with him obviously being sort of taken in by that bear from the previous episode, the self-professed king. And they have a little laugh, and it's quite an energetic scene. James McAvoy, I think, is really well cast in this role, and it's a really angry, frustrated sort of sort of seem really from Lyra's point of view, she's really angry at him for not telling her the truth, and then, for not telling him about who the mother was. And she tries to give him the device because they've sort of decided it is the best way for him to be protected, because obviously you can get information on it, you can see, potential dangers coming. And he just wants no part of it. He just says, I didn't want you here, I wanted you out of harm's way. And he's actually really cold towards her because at the end he kind of shrugs her off a bit and sort of says, because she says, what sort of father are you? And he sort of says, well, that's just the point, isn't it? I'm no sort of father, or I never wanted to be a father. And it is this moment of brutal honesty, and I think in his mind there is some integrity to what he's doing. I mean, if he can't be a good father, then it's best to sort of, give the child the best opportunity to have proper adults in their life. But at the same time, the fact that he puts his, adventures and his projects ahead of Lyra is pretty bad form, to be honest, for obvious reasons. But it's a really well played out scene. And we're still at this point not sure why he has this interest in Roger, and we get some bonding between Lyra and Roger over the fact that they're both kind of orphans, or they were orphans. I mean, not exactly orphans, but the fact that both of them sort of grew up without parents and have had to find their own way, sort of thing. And there's this awkward sort of tension between them at one point, but they sort of bond and come together. At the same time, Lord Asriel tells his assistant then he's going to leave, basically. Then he wants to continue his experiments, and that time is of the essence. And he's reluctant to say goodbye to Lyra because, for whatever reason, it'd just be awkward. He feels it's best just to leave her, without any big sort of moment. But he asks his assistant to look after Lyra for him, which the assistant, I think, is happy to do, but he's also reluctant because he's kind of saying, you should stay here, you should stay with your daughter, that sort of thing, and she deserves an explanation. And this is the part of it which they just play to perfection, because Lyra wakes up, and sorry, I'm almost skipping a bit there, as I do sometimes. So Lord Asriel wakes up Lyra during the night, and he tells her, kind of explains to her the history of dust, sort of thing. And he uses this whole metaphor to do with Adam and Eve, and he kind of explains that dust is sort of seen as this sort of evil sort of thing by the magisterium and the powers that be, and he's kind of tying it to the metaphor of eating apples and Adam's and Eve. And he's kind of saying to Lyra, but what if it holds the secret of the universe? What if we can, use it to cross, into other realms, other worlds? And he's obviously talking about the world in the sky, the other universe. And she's kind of taken in by this and quite excited. You can see how bubbly and enthusiastic Lyra is. And it's a big moment in the episode because it's sort of the one time they really bond in the episode. And it's the first time she's ever really bonded with her father. Whilst knowing he's her father, I guess it's fair to say. Obviously, she's had other encounters with him without knowing who he was exactly. But then comes the twist, which is Lyra wakes up the next morning and, she's confronted by, I forget the assistant's name, Zorodat or something like that, and he kind of tries to explain to Lyra, then Lord Asriel has gone and that she needs to stay there with him so he can protect her. And but then the twist is that Lord Asriel has actually taken Roger, which the assistant sort of explains, and or Roger's missing, and Lyra sort of pieces it together, and the assistant's trying to explain. And Lyra figures it out herself. He wants him for dust. He wants Roger to continue his experiment. So it becomes this frantic chase. And Lyra calls on Larek, and they travel across to this other place, to the mountains. And it's actually a beautiful visual because Lyric summons like a whole army of bears, and they all come marching together. Really striking visual. But then at the same time, obviously Ruth Wilson, Miss Coulter, is still kind of in charge, if you like, or at least has power. And she sees the bears from the ship, and she says fire, and then they start firing at the bears. These beams and demons come down. It's like this whole big dramatic battle. Again, it looks really impressive. And some of the bears do get killed. It's pretty brutal. Lyric survives along with Lyra. I mean, Lyra sort of runs for cover. Her and Lyric survive though, but they get to this bridge which Lyric can't cross. He says, I can't go any further. So that's kind of their sort of parting of the ways, if you like, at least for now. But he's helped her out and has made a big difference. So she has to go on her own now. She has to climb the mountain, and so it's this frantic sort of race. And Lord Asriel has tricked Roger. He's tricked him into saying, Lyra's going to follow on with my assistant, and that we're going to surprise her with something. And he ends up by tricking him and trapping him in a cage. So this is what I mean. You're really seeing this more sinister, murky, manipulative side of Lord Asriel, and it's sort of this borderline thing where up to now you've kind of been with him. Like, I think you could always see there was faults in him potentially before, but at the same time it seemed to be coming from a good place, and he seemed to be on the good side of the battle, if you like. But this really tips it over. I mean, what he does here with Roger is obviously totally wrong. Very manipulative, and sacrificing this kid just for his experiments. And he even tries to justify it to Roger. He says, I'm really sorry about this, but in war there has to be sacrifices, and trust me, Roger, this is a war. So he's basically using his dust to experiment. And Lyra is climbing this mountain with Pan, frantically trying to get there. And she gets there, but it's just too late, basically, and the light shoots off, it explodes, and Lyra falls down and lands on the ground, and it's taken out by the explosion basically. Not dead, I hasten to add, but she's knocked down and is sort of knocked unconscious for a minute or two. And so that's kind of that. I mean, Roger is killed off, he's sacrificed. But the big twist, or well, not exactly twist, but is that Miss Coulter gets to Lord Astral. She finds him. There's a scene with her and its assistant, which is again really great scene. Really, again, Ruth Wilson really on electric in the scene, because she's very icy and like intimidating, and she's really putting pressure on the assistant to sort of tell him where Lord Astral is, and she's trying to manipulate the situation really. So she kind of threatens him with, "I should throw you to the walls," but then she's also trying to win him over. She's kind of saying, "Lord Astral has always treated us badly, especially you." So she's trying to prey on this sort of sensitive side, or trying to convince him that he's treated you badly, why should you be loyal to him? And it clearly works, because in the next scene, she's caught up, she's found Lord Astral, so clearly the assistant did tell her. But yeah, it's a really well played scene. Again, Ruth Wilson is just fantastic in it. And so we get a big sort of climactic sort of scene with Lord Astral and with Miss Coulter, where she confronts him. And again, great chemistry with Ruth Wilson and James McAvoy. And this is the first time they've been on screen together, so it does feel like a big dramatic moment. Two big name actors, two really fine actors. And I mean, this is when it turns it all around, because she essentially is trying to stop the madness of Lord Astral, and she is appealing to his human side and appealing to him really to try and do what's best and stop this for Lyra's point of view. So the big sort of reveal really from Miss Coulter's point of view is the fact that she's been doing all this really to protect Lyra, to get to Lyra, so that she can be in her daughter's life. And that's kind of what it's all been about for her. Now, don't get me wrong, she's clearly gone about it the wrong way. We've seen that, some really extreme actions. And a lot of people have suffered that have got in her way, but at the same time, it is refreshing actually then we see then it is about Lyra for her. She truly wants to be in Lyra's life. And that's what it boils down to, and that's what I mean about you have this sort of role reversal where suddenly it is Astral painted in the bad light, because he's trying to he just wants to get on with his experiment. It's a murky character, because on the one hand, what the Magisterium is doing is definitely wrong, and there is some merit to what Astral is saying about these things shouldn't be suppressed. We should be allowed to discover new things and experiment. But at the same time, he is going about it the wrong way, and obviously what he did with Roger was bang out of order, even though I think Roger was a little shit, but that's neither here or there. He didn't deserve to die. And it suddenly makes Astral a lot more murky and sort of unsympathetic and quite egotistical in a way. So I do like this whole reveal, the fact that she's been doing this for Lyra, and she doesn't care about the Magisterium's plan. She just wanted to get to her daughter and protect her. again, shades of light and dark, because she's using sort of her sexuality and her manipulative sort of powers. I felt that a bit in the scene with the lab assistant, and you see it again with Asriel here. They're up on the mountain. It all looks very cinematic and striking, and she's kind of appealing to his human side, but at the same time there's a little bit of seduction, and they do kiss. I mean, there's obviously still this spark between them, and it's really played on a knife edge. You're not sure which way the scene's going to go, because he tries to convince her to go with him on the journey, to try and find out, to carry this on. And this is another reveal that Miss Coulter used to do this in the past. I guess that's how they sort of met, and where their relationship was at its peak, if you like. But she moved away from that, I guess, once Lyra was born, and I think Asriel, there was a disagreement over that. He just wanted to focus on his sort of work. And I think the more and more this plays out, and you think about it, the more and more it paints him in a bad sort of light, because he was so caught up in his adventures, and he, didn't really want anything to do with Lyra, and that's why he sort of took her to the college. And I mean, at the time, I think there was some consent, because Miss Coulter has said that, she did agree to let him take Lyra at the time, but, she made the comment in a past episode about it was, just because she didn't want to argue or get in his way what he wanted. So there's this impression of him being very dominant. But they have this kiss, and I mean, for a moment I thought she was going to be seduced and go along with him. But no, she doesn't. She says she's not going to go, and she's only here for Lyra. So that's kind of that, and he obviously sets off again to the skies. But a really good scene. And then she looks for Lyra, but she can't. I mean, at this point, Lyra still doesn't know whether she can trust her, and she's in the mindset that obviously she can't trust her, so she sort of hides behind one of the mountains so Miss Coulter can't see her. And then Lyra obviously finds Roger. Her and Pan say goodbye. Daphne Keane, again, really great the way she sells, the sadness over Roger's passing, and they say, his death can't be in vain. So they fly up to the skies, and they set off on the mission to get to Astral, to use the dust for good, essentially. And so now I'll talk briefly about the will plot in this episode. You don't get much of it, but I thought it was important to do the Lyra and the main stuff first, because the two halves are being connected at the end of the episode and setting up the next season, the next book. So the agents are still looking for Will during this episode, and they find out that then Lorraine has a son, Will, and that he has special powers, and that there's like this connection to like these other objects, like this spyglass, I think, and this knife, which I'm assuming are the ones that mentioned in the title of the other books, the amber spyglass and the subtle knife. So Will's sort of on the run because he knows they're going to be looking for him. So they start looking, and one of them sort of uses a police radio to and he fakes, being a police officer, so he sort of gets the police out and looking for Will without Will knowing. And so you just get a little bit of Will, sort of on the run from them. And right at the end of the episode, we see him, and there's a cat, and he starts following the cat, and it's not really, you don't get it confirmed, but I assumed the cat was like a demon or something, like his demon potentially, because then what happens is he follows the cat into like this wall, and he puts his arm and it goes through the wall, and so the wall is like a portal into the next dimension, so into the same universe as Lyra is. So I'm assuming the cat is going to be his demon in the other dimension. So he basically walks through the portal, the wall into the dimension, and it's just as he hears police sirens in the background. So obviously, yeah, they're on their way to get him. So he sort of does it in the nick of time. And it literally, you get this perfect sort of symmetry with him and Lyra. So he walks through the portal, he enters the dimension, and at the same time, Lyra and Pan are going up into the air to try and stop Lord Astral, or to get to this dust before him. And yeah, it's a really effective way to end the season and to set up the next season. And interesting now to see what they do with Will in the next dimension. But that's the final episode of season 1, His Dark Materials, and I've really enjoyed it. I think it's been a really strong season. I think the production values have been excellent. I think the story has been really well paced. The cast have been very strong, particularly the main cast. And yeah, I think it's got a good mix of light and dark. There's certainly been some very dark stuff going on, some impressive battles, some good emotional moments. So it was a bit slow getting going. The first few episodes were hit and miss in my opinion, but then I think part of that was just because it was setting things up moving forward. I certainly remember not being very impressed with the first episode. I think that was definitely the weakest, but it did grow from there. And I remember the 4th episode, which, for those who saw my top 10 episodes video, will know that episode, Armor, featured in that. But that was kind of the big episode in the middle that really set us on the path for the rest of the season. And after that, it never really looked back. So really impressive first season, especially since I'm not a big fantasy fan, but I enjoyed it a lot. And Daphne Keane seems a star in the making. So there you have it. That has been my review of episode 8 of His Dark Materials. Let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and they will be returning with season 2 next year, and I'm pretty certain I will be covering season 2 since I enjoyed this one. Now there's a good chance this might be my last video of the year on the channel, and if it is, I would like to thank all the subscribers this year, all the new subscribers, all the people who have supported the channel, who took part in the live streams and commented, liked the videos. Thank you very much for your support. You've really helped the channel to grow, and I've had some great fun interacting with you on the live streams and various things. So thank you very much for your support. And I wish you all a very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and there's obviously much more content to come in 2020. More list videos, more politics talk, including a certain US election next year, and many more television and film reviews. to come on the channel, plus more live streams. So some great stuff coming up in 2020, and I hope you can join me for it. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.